Euphoria laced with caution. That's probably the best way to sum up the mood in the corridors of power after the Rajya Sabha voted to amend the constitution to facilitate the goods and services tax. One major hurdle has been cleared, but there's miles to go before the landmark tax becomes a reality.
Eventually, it was the inherent maturity of Indian politics that prevailed.
A triumphant finance minister continued with his conciliatory tone a day after the major GST breakthrough. But the team at North Block realized they are in for many more sleepless nights.
The anxieties and uncertainties of the states are really understandable at this stage. So part of it, and caution and prudence would dictate that they don't want to lose revenue. So they have a certain approach to these calculations. But so we'll have to see how this unfolds over the next few months.
It will be a race against time for the central government to ensure GST gets implemented from the 1st of April next year. First, they need state assemblies to pass legislations.
Our target is within next 30 days, we must get approval of 16 states.
The process of ratification by 50% of the states, that is the next step which needs to be taken. And one would expect that to go through very smoothly.
Not just that, the centre is confident that the IT infrastructure will be ready for rollout and trial runs will begin by the end of this year.
By December end, all the software, back-end and front-end, by all the three agencies, GSTN, CBEC and all the states, should be ready. So we will then devote the next 3 months period of January to March to do the actual live testing of all the transactions.
But there is one major hurdle, the GST rate. Many states have made it clear that they want rates to be higher than what was proposed by the Arvind Subramanian panel.
Most of the ministers, not most, I don't think anybody formally accepted economic advisors' figures. Everyone who spoke demanded a higher rate, and the higher rate they demanded was, they referred to 25% as a revenue neutral rate which had a National Institute of Public Finance and Policy. Later they had brought it down to 22%.
The report makes very clear that all these numbers are of course based on certain assumptions and conditional on certain policy choices that the GST Council will have to make. Things like, how do you tax certain commodities? How much of the exemptions do you get rid of? In terms of the assumptions, what do we assume about compensation? So that's one part of it. The other part of it is that, the states themselves have only just begun these calculations in any serious manner. So over the next months, I think all of us are going to be going back to the drawing board, revisiting our assumptions, checking what new assumptions to make, and also see what policy choices are going to be made. Because it's finally that interplay of all of those which will, I think, determine the rate.
The finance minister is optimistic that a middle ground on the GST rates can be found soon.
Chief Economic Advisor believes that a more reasonable rate is possible. Some states have a contrarian view. So we are today living with those two views. How we are able to converge it over the next few weeks or months, it remains to be seen.
Yeah, last but one.
And let me just say this. ये 18% जो है वो चीफ इकोनॉमिक एडवाइजर के साथ चिपक गया है. उन्होंने 18% कहा नहीं था. What he had said was that this is a price band between 16.9 to 18.9, which is actually closer to 17 to 19%. He had given a band.
The centre could also face fiscal problems, but the finance secretary believes the fiscal deficit target will not be breached.
I think we've done all our calculations and we find that the supplementaries, of course, are for those programs and projects where it was absolutely necessary. We are quite confident that with these additionality in the expenditure, we should be able to maintain our targets, fiscal deficit targets.
But it's not just the rates. Manufacturing states like Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, among others, are still concerned over loss of revenue.
Every state is a welfare state. We have also obligations, and ultimately, at no cost the state governments can compromise their existing revenues. No doubt the Government of India has said that in the legislation they will provide compensation for the next 5 years, but still then ultimately revenues cannot be compromised. And
The chief economic advisor admits that manufacturing states will see some losses, but he's also hoping that higher revenues will offset those losses.
The intuition is that the largest potential losers are going to be the net manufacturing states. But I think my intuition tells me that because many of those states also have, the largest urban centers, which are going to be, producing and consuming services, it tends to, suggest to me that one shouldn't get over anxious about what these, losses will be for the states, because, Maharashtra has Bombay, Karnataka has Bangalore, Tamil Nadu has Chennai. These are all big service centers likely to generate a lot of money in services, revenues in services. And remember, services are the future. They're going to be the most, they're a rising share of the economy, the most buoyant part of the economy.
The other fear is around inflation, but the centre is confident that price rise will not be drastic.
54% of the GST tax, 54% of the CPI basket is completely exempt, will be exempt from the GST. Another about 33-34% is taxed at the lower rate, and at the standard rate, in fact, only 12 or 15% is taxed. So, intrinsically, most of the CPI is taxed quite lightly, and that is even more true for the consumption basket of the poorest.
After GST, India becomes one market, and there will be seamless flow of input tax credit. So typically, it will bring down the cost of production, and it should not lead to any inflation.
As India gears up to enter uncharted waters, it promises to be a long and shaky journey. Hopefully, it will be a fruitful one. With Sapna Das in New Delhi, Bureau Report, CNBC TV 18.
All right.